Welcome to Emma Vura Audiobooks channel. This is playlist of Emma Vura crime files, Rewind, where every story starts at the end. The story is called The Cartographer's Error. Get comfortable. Here's where it ends. The end. The cabin was still smoking faintly, thin gray ribbons curling up slowly through the collapsed roof beams into the cold morning air. Sirens long since gone quiet, when Warren Steig handed the fire investigator his insurance paperwork unprompted. A little too quickly, his hands not quite steady on the folder, paper slightly out of order. She glanced down at the GPS coordinates he'd scrawled hastily at the bottom of the page in blue pen, then back up at the official county survey map already open across her clipboard, its lines drawn in a different, more careful hand entirely, and asked him, quite simply, in an almost gentle voice, why the two sets of numbers didn't match at all. He started to answer twice and stopped both times. She waited. Investigators, she'd learned over 11 years on the job, always got their best information in the silence right after a question, before a man had time to build a better lie than the one he'd already prepared driving over. The boundary's always been there, he finally said, and she nodded slowly, already knowing that was the exact sentence a guilty man says when he's rehearsed something, and it comes out sounding rehearsed. Hours earlier, Warren had spent the entire cold morning carefully feeding investigators a boundary line 40 full feet off from the true one, hoping, almost praying under his breath while he waited by the ambulance that never needed to come, that no one would think to cross-check it against the newly completed county survey before his insurance check had any time at all to clear the bank and cover what he already owed on the property twice over. He'd rehearsed the story in his truck on the drive over, saying it out loud to the empty passenger seat until it sounded natural, until the panic in his own voice sounded like grief instead. It hadn't worked as well as he'd hoped. The investigator had been doing this for 11 years. And grief, she always said, sounds different from a man protecting a number. Days earlier, a week earlier, surveyor Inez Calloway had told him gently, but with absolutely no room left for any misunderstanding, standing at his own kitchen table with a rolled-up map spread between two coffee mugs, that his cabin sat entirely on protected wetland, worthless on paper, essentially unsellable, quite possibly subject to a demolition order within the coming year regardless of what he did or didn't do about it. Warren had already remortgaged the property months earlier to fund an addition he'd never even finished building, the framing still exposed to the weather out back. He'd asked Inez more than once that afternoon if there was any way around it, any appeal, any version of the county's rules that left him a way out. She'd told him kindly but honestly that she'd checked twice already because she liked him, and there wasn't one. Burning it down quietly seemed, in the thick fog of his mounting panic that week, simpler by far than losing it slowly and publicly to a courtroom he genuinely couldn't afford to fight in for years. Weeks earlier, Inez had been resurveying the entire county for months after a sudden sinkhole near the reservoir exposed just how badly wrong the old property records had quietly been for decades. Records nobody had thought to double-check since they were first drawn up by hand. Her thick final report threatened dozens of landowners scattered across 3 separate townships, each one a small paragraph in a much larger document. Warren's name was only one unremarkable line in that longer document, filed alphabetically, nothing about it flagged as urgent to anyone but him. The beginning. The error traced all the way back to 1962, when Warren's own grandfather, a surveyor himself, working for the county back when every map was still drawn carefully by hand with pen and ruler, quietly shifted a boundary line 40 feet to do an old friend a simple, forgettable favor nobody was ever meant to notice. That single small kindness gave Warren's family the very land they built their cabin on, and 60-some years later, cost his grandson everything in one single desperate night he'd spend the rest of his life regretting. Inez Calloway, as it turned out, was the granddaughter of that very same friend Warren's grandfather had once quietly helped decades earlier, a fact neither woman nor arsonist had known until the fire investigator read both surnames aloud, one after the other, from the very same weathered report, in the same flat and unhurried voice she used for everything, including the sentence that came right after it. Thanks for rewinding this one with us on Emavora Crime Files. If you want to catch the next one, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. A new rewind story. I'll see you in the next one.